First, credit where credit's due. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese made a fine speech in Washington today, honouring the vital role the United States has as leader of the free world. He paid tribute to, and I quote, the peace and freedom that America seeks to defend around the globe. The principle, he said, that every country, big or small, should be able to shape its own destiny and secure its own future, where the sovereignty of every nation is respected and the dignity and liberty of every individual is recognised. That, he declared, is what our alliance with the United States is all about. The PM said a shared belief that freedom, peace and equality are not just American ideals or Australian values, they belong to all mankind. Now, of course, he's right. But there's a problem there, isn't there? In fact, there are two problems. The first is that he's almost going straight from Washington to Beijing, where freedom, peace and equality aren't exactly front and centre. I mean, basically, they don't exist. So what's he going to tell the Chinese? That the Uyghurs should be released from slave labour, that Hong Kong should have restored the freedoms that his predecessor Deng Xiaoping had promised, that China's got no right to use force against Taiwan? Because if that's not his message, that speech he just made in Washington is nothing more than empty posturing. The Beijing trip is all about being there to mark the 50th anniversary of Gough Whitlam's historic visit. So it's as much about the legacy interests of the Labor Party as Australia's interests. And sure, while there, he'll presumably plead for all our exporters still subject to the capricious and unfair bans that China imposed on us, because we were one of the first countries in the world to demand an inquiry into the origins of COVID. Now, we shouldn't walk back from that, because knowing how the pandemic started, given it shut down the globe for 2+ years, well, that's critical. Churchill famously said, jaw jaw is better than war, meaning talk between leaders, especially where they don't see eye to eye, is important. Now, given the myriad of international conferences that all key leaders attend, talking on the fringes of one of these events on neutral territory, rather than turning up to Beijing's home soil, well, I reckon that'd be far better. Because this visit at this time is giving the current Beijing regime more respect than it deserves, especially since he couldn't find time to visit Israel, or even, as far as we know, talk to Israel's leader in its hour of need.
It's a worrying situation. I guess a lot of Australians would say, well, you know, why do we have an interest in this? And it's the other side of the world, and why do we care about it? But as you point out, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, the same as ISIS, as Al-Qaeda, and they're involved in attacks and Australian citizens as they travel abroad, and our interests otherwise in the Middle East come under threat when you don't challenge these terrorist groups. Obviously, there's a very significant equity for us in supporting the only democracy in the Middle East, in Israel, which is why the Prime Minister should visit and stand alongside Prime Minister Netanyahu in the same way that the President of France has, the German Chancellor, the UK Prime Minister, the US President. That's the company that we keep. We don't keep company with Iran and North Korea and Russia and people of that ilk.
While in the United States, President Biden's main message to our PM has been the need for democratic solidarity in the face of dictators' aggression. And what's the main point of the Albanese visit to the US? To secure the permissions we need for our nuclear submarine program to proceed, so we can have a credible sovereign defence against the communist superpower. And here's the second problem for the Prime Minister. For all the government's generally steady approach to foreign policy and national security, there's a dangerous lack of urgency to boosting our own short-term military capability as the world grows darker by the day. And the government's domestic policies are eroding our economic strength, on which all of our national security ultimately rests. And whether it's the green mania that the National Farmers Federation today is so comprehensively attacked, or the emissions obsession that's soon going to deliver more power price hikes, further deindustrialisation and blackouts as routine. Labor just doesn't get that the mining and agricultural sectors are our main areas of comparative economic advantage. And it's that exports from these sectors, well, they prop up our whole national prosperity. Now, that's the trouble. The PM's talking strength in Washington while undermining it here at home. His words might please Washington, but his deeds, some of them at least, will only please Beijing.